So I'm sitting here eating my dinner and watching this video of Stephen Weigel talking about Angine de Poitrine and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. And thought kind of clicked into place, something I'd been wondering about. Angine de Poitrine claims to be Dadaist. Dadaism, historically, is associated with socialism, but also as a protest art attack on the mainstream. So I get behind the attack on the mainstream. They are slaying it. But what's interesting is reading into things like the dollar signs on the eyes, the representation that is because what was it I watched earlier today? I think was the Dickie Dines analysis and deep dive on it, which had a lot of really good points. Once it was a commercial product, they gave the dollar signs on the eyes, little improvements in evolution. It's all organic. It's very cool, right? But so here's the thing. The way that they are running it independently is the most capitalist way to do it. And that's a good thing. So let me explain. Anybody who tells you that capitalism is the process of gouging prices and overcharging and hooking your buddies up on the side is wrong. And whoever told them that that's what it is misled them, whether intentionally or not. We're not going to go into blame on that. We're just going to say that is incorrect. Capital is private property. Capitalism is the exchange of private property, ergo goods, for a value determined and agreed upon. That is it. Literally, that is it. Now, there is consumerism. This is services. This is things that you really don't have a lot to show for after the fact. So fast food, watching a movie, like at a theater, you get the experience and whatever, but these are not, this is consumerism. Now, then there is commercialism. Commercialism is where you just get the products that the advertising suggests that you need. You believe the magazines and all the things you need to get. You do the Patrick Bateman daily routine with all the facial mask and all that, and whatever it is that you do. That is commercialism. So you've got commercial consumerism as like a parasitic add-on to capitalism at its root. Capitalism is not the problem. The commercialism and consumerism are. And these are places where corporate interests do things that are maybe unethical. You can be then anti-corporate, right? But when the corporate and government work together, now you're getting into something approaching fascism. But capitalism is not really the basis of it. The idea of equal exchange for goods or equivalent exchange for goods or, value, that's not wrong, because when you upend that, what it means is that you have to put in an all day's work to get 1 grain of rice. And because the rules have been changed, your concept of value is the old way of thinking. So don't you go thinking that working 8 hours in the field to get this grain of rice is unfair, or you will be punished and re-educated. That's communism. So if you think that socialism, which invariably, inevitably fails and leads to communism, because this is where the government takes over, the military is in charge of all of it, and you effectively have a military authoritarian dictatorship that then determines unfairly for many people the value in exchange for the services that they provide or the goods that they receive. Capitalism is not at the root of anything. Capitalism is simply the process of you have property, that property belongs to you. No one takes it from you rightfully until you either give it freely or exchange it for something of value. That is capitalism. That is it. So that's not the problem. And getting rid of that won't change. And if you get rid of the commercialism and consumerism in the system and replace it fully with socialism, you're not necessarily going to remove the capitalist aspect. You may eventually come to a point where property is theft and you don't own anything. You are renting or leasing all things: your desk, your chair, your shoes, your clothes, your phone, your house. That to me seems unfair. that can just be taken at any time because you disagree with the government. You can't say that it ain't going to happen. Look at what they're doing in Canada right now. They got a guy that disagreed with the government, and now he's being certified mentally incompetent. They're going to lock him in an asylum because while he may have mental illnesses like bipolar or ADHD, him disagreeing with the government is not worthy of that. That is tyrannical. That is authoritarian. Locking up your dissidents. That's fascism, right? So the reason I'm getting to this is Engin de Poitrine, 5 minutes into the video, they retain ownership of the rights. Everything is delegated in ways that they retain creative control and ownership of their material. Publishing in certain districts and areas goes to companies they have contracts with, but they retain the rights to their material and supposedly still work day jobs. That's capitalism. You can do this thing, and at the same time, if you want to have other money on the side, you can do this. Keep your taxes separate for your careers or whatever. That's capitalism. Saying, hey man, you can use our material, we're going to monetize your content for that material, but you're free to use it, we won't mess with you. That's capitalism. They can make the choice. They allow other people to enjoy it and use it freely. Being a commercial product, you get capital. I've got vinyl records on the way. I'm excited about this. Capital is private property that you hold, that you own, that you have exchanged for value. So I may have a piece of private property containing Engin de Poitrine's art and music. That's capitalism. The fact that the money goes straight to the band because they don't have some bullshit consumer commercial deals in the middle, too much, that's capitalism. And it's good. It's fair. It gets that band the money they deserve, as close to it as possible, instead of doing it the old way, which is getting signed on to some small sub-pop bullshit, screw you over, give you 5%. Then eventually your contract's up, you've got enough notoriety, you get signed on with a Geffen. And with the Geffen, they're like, hey, cool, you get 25%. That's 5 times as much of the percentage, and we'll get so much more money, bro, you're going to be a millionaire. Meanwhile, the rights and ownership and everything are just in a freaking cloud of wherever it happens to land, whatever they happen to sign on. Ends up probably not being in their possession. That's the whole thing Taylor Swift had happen. That's the whole thing that Kesha had happen. Michael Jackson's whole thing with Sony was over that with the Beatles. They have avoided all of that by remaining independent, by doing it their way and succeeding. That's capitalism. That's like the American dream. They're Canadian, but it doesn't even matter. They're living it. That's the point. That's what I wanted to get at in this video, is that regardless of whether they claim to be socialists or not, because I've never heard this, if they've said some things that are like, yeah, they're from Canada, which means they're going to be quite a bit more socially liberal in their mentality as a default. Yeah, I get it. That's cool. But as far as this idea that, you know, what Dadaism represents, they're clearly doing it. But at the same time, whether they realize it or not, they are demonstrating why capitalism is the superior system. And that the real problem, the cancer, is crooked crony consumer commercialism. It really isn't capitalist at all, because capitalism is a fair bargain for goods and or services. Fair. That's capitalism. So that's what I got. Thank you for watching. I want to make a little addendum to tack on here at the end. I think maybe what the problem is that people seem to think is the issue is the free market part of capitalism. But without a free market, you have some arbitrary entity which may be unfair or may have its own profit-driven motives defining value, or a government agency defining value. You may not agree with the government. You may not agree with the value they assign. Therefore, a free market, being one where the person selling and the person buying come to an agreement on the value. That is the essence of the free market, which is a good thing.